These wooden blocks represent the faults that might be in your swing. If you spend your time and attention focusing and working on the wrong fault, that's all that improves, and often you don't get a lot better. The key in golf is to make sure you find your first domino, because if you spend your time and attention working on that, all the other faults fix themselves for free. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can find and fix your first domino. So we're going to take a look at Rob Monroe's golf swing. Now, I wouldn't do this in person if I was coaching Rob, but for the purpose of this video, let's list the faults that I see in Rob's golf swing, and then we're going to see if you can find that first domino that's going to fix all of those. So he takes quite a nice setup to the golf ball, he's hitting driver, but as he goes back, notice his hips move in towards the golf ball, so they kind of thrust forwards. Then if you watch the peak of his hat, from start to the top of his backswing, it lifts up and moves away from the golf ball. So Rob is moving out of his body angles. Then if we get into the top, his shoulders have turned quite flat. His left arm is also quite flat as well at the top. And then as he moves into his downswing, and we stop him around about here, he's kind of lost a lot of those angles that he created at setup. And that was something we would like to change. And then relative to his body angle, the club shaft is quite steep. Now there's a few other things that happen through impact, but those are the kind of big faults that I see in Rob's golf swing. But what is that first domino? What am I seeing in Rob's golf swing that can really help him with all of those other things? I'd love you to pause the video, drop down, let me know what you think you would work on. What is Rob's first domino? So Rob's first domino is his right knee and his right hip in the early part of the backswing. That's what I would be seeing as the first thing that we need to target, which is going to get all of the other things happening for free. So let me explain what I mean by that. So if I just took a setup to this golf ball, I mean, I've got a 5-iron here. I know Rob had a driver, but the same sort of things apply. If you look at his backswing, his right knee doesn't really move too much from its starting position. It actually straightens a little bit and then it actually reflexes. And when it's at the top of his backswing, it hasn't really moved at all. So if I took a setup here and I held my right knee in place and I held my right hip in place, what is my body going to do? Well, if I took the club and the arms out of the equation, if this stays in place and this stays in place, I'm going to make a backswing which is very much like this. Now I'm exaggerating this a little bit more than what we see with Rob's golf swing, but notice how the left thigh has come a long way forward. Notice how the left shoulder has raised up, giving me that flat shoulder turn. We saw his lead heel raise off the ground and his hips moved in towards the golf ball. Now, because he made that movement with his body, he was then going to put his arms into a flatter position as well. Now, the issue there is that when he gets to the top of the backswing with driver, his body position and his arm shape almost suggests that he wants that ball to be on a tee that's kind of 3.5, 4 feet in the air. The ball isn't there, it's on the ground. Well, it's teed up, but it's near as damn it on the ground. So what do you have to do? Well, once he's made this backswing move, he has to either tip his body back down, which he doesn't do, or start to steepen the club to get the club to sort of point at the ball. But then his golf club and his body are very much out of sync. And then as he goes through the ball, he's inconsistent with strike and maybe a little bit with direction as well. So lots of things are happening just because of what his right knee and right hip are doing. What I would get Rob to do, and this would be the first thing I'd work on him, would be to get him to take a setup, put the club across his shoulders. I'd have him remove the club and the arms initially just to simplify it. And I would explain to him that as we rotate back, the right knee and the right hip need to move very differently. His right hip needs to move back and behind him. I'm going to give you a really simple drill in a moment to show you what that's like. And his right leg should start to lose flex. So that would look a little bit more like this. So you can see how that's a very, very different move. My trail leg is straightened by some amount and my right hip has moved behind me. Now there's two exercises that I would give Rob. And I know from my experience that there's going to be so many of you watching this who struggle with your lower body movement. Now think of it in this way. The golf swing is built from the ground up. If your knees, your legs and your hips don't move in the right way, it's almost impossible for the things above it, shoulders, arms, club, to move effectively. It's just not going to happen. So if you can get your lower body moving correctly, the upper body is then allowed to do the right thing. And that's exactly the case in Rob's golf swing. So here's the first little exercise I would give to Rob. I would ask him to take and an alignment stick, place it through his belt loops. So I'd have him alignment stick through his belt loops. And if I took a posture, and again, we've removed the golf club just to make it a little bit simpler, I would be getting Rob to focus on this end of the alignment stick, the trail side, and actually in his backswing, moving this behind him and into the air. Okay, so that would look something like this. I'm sort of can see this out the corner of my eye, and I'm going to be moving it back and up. And that causes my knee to move in a very different way. And it allows me to rotate, which is really, really important, but I'm rotating on that important angle. That angle is the angle we set at address. We create good angles, and then we rotate in those angles. Notice how my head is not moving, and notice how my hips are staying back against that line. Now this is going to put me in a much better position at the top with my body, and that in turn is going to allow my arms to be much, much steeper because they're moving or swinging around my shoulders. As I start to get taller, my arms start to go flatter. So this would be the first little exercise I'd have Rob do. And again, this is done without a golf club. And really I'd have him doing this in front of a reflection or a mirror, just so he can sort of see the movement that he's trying to make. Now, if you're watching this video and you're thinking to yourself, I wonder what my first domino is. I wonder what the thing is in my golf swing that's causing all of those other faults. Well, at the end of the video, I'm going to reveal what I've seen over the last 20 odd years coaching, the 4 most common dominoes that I've seen. These are the 4 that really give golfers so many problems, and the chances are if your game isn't where it needs to be, you will be struggling with one of these 4, so we're going to go through those at the end. Now the next little exercise I'd have Rob do is a little lawnmower exercise. This is great, really simple, and this is something that he can do on the golf course if he's playing to give himself the right feeling. I'm sure many of you will have or recall petrol or diesel lawnmowers where you actually have to sort of pull it to start that lawnmower. Okay, so you might have the lawnmower, you grab the handle and you'd have to pull it to get it started. Okay, that's the visual I want you to have, Rob. So you're going to take a setup and you're going to get your right hand down as if you're holding that sort of cord. Now the chances are to pull that, you wouldn't just use your arm. This would feel quite weak and quite strange. What you would do is you'd take your right side, your knee, your hip, your shoulder, and you would pull it away from that lawnmower in this fashion here. Now, when I've done that in the past, for many golfers, that doesn't feel like a turn. They're not seeing it as a turn. In their mind, they're not thinking turn, they're just thinking, pull that lawnmower. But actually, when we look at the body, that's exactly where the body needs to be at the top of your golf swing. The right side has had to pull away from the golf ball, meaning the left side has had to move down in towards the golf ball, and that's rotation on an angle. And with someone like Rob, the key for him really is, yes, understanding the movements that he's got to make and what it should look like so we can check it, but it's changing his concepts, changing his ideas on what he believes the golf swing should be. I would suggest, and I'm guessing this, but Rob, you can drop down in the comments box, I believe that at some point in his career he's had the idea of holding that right knee in place, or maybe he's had the idea of bracing the legs. Unfortunately, from my experience, both quite detrimental to the golf swing, and if you're thinking that, it's really not going to help. Drifting back to the right, that should be on the green. Before we go through the 4 dominoes, does this sound familiar to you? You go to the range, you work on your swing, you improve some of the faults that you think you have, but you don't actually get better. You don't seem to hit the ball better. You don't see those scores coming down. Well, it could well be because you're just targeting the wrong domino. You're doing something later in that sequence. So the 4 dominoes that are probably holding you back that you need to work on are, number 1, setup. If you don't get your body set up correctly, it's incredibly difficult to move it as you want to. So have a look at these 2 setups down the line of face on, a couple of checkpoints. Your back of your shoulders should be in front of your knees. You can check that. Your arms should be hanging straight down, and your tailbone should be around about the width of a club outside of your heels. And then from face on, you want about 55% weight on your lead side. You want your hips slightly forwards, and you need a little bit of upper body tilt away from the target. If you can do those things, you're priming your body for the perfect movement. Now the second domino, grip, how you hold the golf club. So common for golfers to get this wrong. If you don't hold it correctly, everything else is going to have to compensate. So we've got to make sure we get it in the fingers and it's the right grip strength. So again, have a look at this image over here. As I look down, I can see 2 knuckles. and on the top hand, and the golf club is very much through the base of the fingers, not through the palm of the hand. Get those two things right, you're going to have a pretty good grip. Now the third thing is how you move the club face in your backswing. If you start to over rotate the club face early on, it's going to get very open. When it gets open, bad things happen. You're going to have to throw the club early, steepen it, swing across to the left, all of those kind of things to compensate for the open club face. So again, have a look at the image. In that takeaway, club face is tilted down towards the ground by about the same amount that I'm tilted over the golf ball. That's a great checkpoint. And the fourth domino, what we've just covered with Rob, how you move your trail, hip and knee in the backswing. So here's a picture at the top of the golf swing, and just look at the angle across my hips and look at how my knees have changed flex. Look at all the great golfers. Their hips turn on an angle and their knees change in flex. If Rob can do that, that's his first domino. Everything else that we've covered at the start of the video will fall into place. He'll get those for free. So your job is to think like a coach. Find your first domino, focus and practice on improving that.